Okay, so this is a skill builder for Module 2, and it is a very important skill. All physicists know how to draw what are called free body diagrams. Essentially, this is a way of essentially drawing all the forces that are acting on an object. And the reason why it's important is because unless you can draw all the forces, you can't figure out the net force or the overall force acting on an object. And if you can't figure out the net force, you can't really apply Newton's second law. So it is a very important skill, and that's why we're trying to build that skill. So to go ahead and, here's your splashdown page, and hit start, and you're able to choose 12 different situations. And so I'm going to go ahead and just click situation number 1, and it tells me I've got a rightward moving car skidding to a stop across a level roadway with locked wheels. I can ignore air resistance. And so the question is, okay, well, what are the forces acting on this car? Well, again, this is going to take some practice, and I do encourage you to read through chapters, particularly chapter 2 and chapter 3, to learn about the different types of forces and get some practice identifying the forces acting on an object. But if I've got a car, well, first of all, it's something that's got mass, and if it's got mass, I know it's got weight. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a downward force of gravity, because we know that the Earth is pulling on this mass that we call car. We know that car is not just crashing down toward the center of the Earth. I know that as this car moves horizontally across the road, one thing I know is that it's not moving vertically, which tells me that there's got to be an upward force that must be equal to the downward force that we just identified. It's got to be equal to the weight, and that turns out to be the normal force. And I encourage you, if you haven't really read about the normal force, check that out in your book. But sure enough, the roadway, by virtue of the fact that the car is resting on the roadway gets squished a little bit. If you imagine the atoms of the roadway being like little springs, they get squished, but springs only squish so much before they're compressed to the point where they push back with a force that is equal to the weight that's pushing on them. So sure enough, the road exerts an upward normal force that is equal to the weight of the car. Okay, what else is going on? Well, notice that again, this car is skidding to a stop. It's moving along and it comes to a stop. So that tells me, okay, this thing was in motion and then it winds up not being in motion. There must be a net force acting on it. It can't be a zero net. It can't be a zero net force. The forces can't be balanced. I must have some lack of balance. Well, it's coming to a stop. That tells me that it's moving to the right, but it comes to a stop. It's slowing down as it moves to the right. If you recall from last chapter, or I also encourage you to check out the lecture mix for this module, especially when I talk about speeding up and slowing down. If something is moving to the right and slowing down, that tells me the acceleration is to the left. If the acceleration is to the left, that tells me that the net force must be to the left. If the net force is to the left, that tells me there must be a force to the left. What's the force that's to the left? It's the force of friction. Okay, the road pushing on the tires to the left. And this car is skidding. It's not moving. There is no propulsion. So therefore, I think I'm done. There are no forces to the right. Notice that overall, my forces are balanced vertically, but horizontally, they're not balanced. I've got a leftward force of friction, and there is no balance. There's no balancing force to the right. So therefore, my overall net force is to the left, which would give me an acceleration to the left, which would cause my car to slow down. Let's check. And sure enough, we've accurately constructed the free body diagram. That's just one of 12, so I encourage you to get more practice doing this, going through the rest of the situations.